Melun-Villaroche on the 17th of November 1956. A small delta-winged aircraft takes off, Roland Glavany at its controls. It's been given the name Mirage 3. This first flight has been preceded less than a year before by a similar test flight by a twin jet named Super Mystère Delta, which will later be renamed Mirage 1. As with the Mirage 1, the main characteristic of the Mirage 3 is its delta wing, soon to become the hallmark of the builder. It's already able to fly at twice the speed of sound. The Mirage 3 was to become one of the milestones in aviation history, with 1,422 aircraft built, serving in 20 air forces. The French Air Force has over time adopted 7 different versions of the aircraft, among which the famous Mirage 3E, modified for ground attack with the installation of the Thomson CSF Cyrano 2 bis radar, supported by a Marconi Doppler navigation system. These electronic systems allowed the Armée de l'Air to operate its first true multi-mission combat jet aircraft. Over the past 20 years, the characteristic silhouette of the Dassault Delta plane was to dominate in the French air defense, training, ground support and reconnaissance units. Since its entry into service in 1964, the Mirage 3, which we see here being prepared to attack a convoy, became the symbol of efficiency and ruggedness, and the first 5 examples delivered to the French Air Force were still serving 25 years later. However, although the shape of the wing was perfectly suitable for high-speed flight, the aircraft was less maneuverable at low speed, and especially when landing. Pilots had to keep a wide safety margin and had to land at speeds of up to 300 kilometers an hour. The aircraft could climb to 9,000 meters in 5 minutes, and the extra fuel reservoir located on the rear fuselage could be exchanged in less than 20 minutes for an SEPR-844 rocket, fueled by nitric acid and kerosene. This rocket, which increased the speed of climb of the aircraft, had nothing to do with the JETO rockets that the Swiss used to improve the takeoff performance of their aircraft. The Troupe d'Aviation, as the Air Force is known in Switzerland, is one of the many uses of Mirage 3s which Dassault modified over the years to respond to specific local requirements. Modifications in this case included adaptation of an expensive American weapons system, reinforcement of the airframe and of the undercarriage, use of a pumpable front undercarriage, and a folding nose for better storage in underground bunkers. Belgium operates a close cousin of the Mirage 3, the Mirage 5, ordered in 1968. This version was less expensive than the Mirage 3 in that it had many of the electronic systems removed, including the radar, although the aircraft does maintain typical Mirage 3 performance, as well as having larger fuel reservoirs and heavier weapons load capacity. Although it also has air-to-air capacity, the Mirage 5BA is well suited to ground attack, while the 5BR has been developed into a reconnaissance aircraft and the 5BD into an operational training aircraft. Although the Belgian Air Force is reducing the number of Mirages it operates as it nears the turn of the century, in order to have a homogeneous fleet of F-16s, it still uses its French delta-winged planes in foreign operations and exercises, such as this one at Balıkesir in Turkey. Improving the low-speed flying characteristics of the Mirage 3 became one of the priorities of the Général Aéronautique Marcel Dassault engineers, who came up in 1969 with the ingenious system of retractable moustaches in the nose of the Milan, which it was hoped would replace the Swiss Hawker Hunters. Guy Mito Mouroua presented the Milan to the Swiss Troupe d'Aviation, showing how its performance was superior to that of the Mirage 3. Takeoff speed reduced by 50 km per hour and a 30% reduction in turn radius at low speed. But the Swiss decided against both the Milan and its competitors, the Fiat G91 and the A4 Skyhawk, preferring to wait for better solutions and updating the old Hawker Hunters in the meantime. In other parts of the world, other solutions were found, such as the installation of canard winglets on the air intakes of these Chilean Panteras, which are in fact Mirage 50s reworked by the Israelis, who have over the years become past masters in the adaptation of French aircraft. The updating of an aircraft, the upgrading of the engine, of the systems and of the structure as a whole being feasible only if the basic airframe is sound and has a potentially long life ahead. The updating of the Pantera was carried out by the Chilean company Enair and gave the aircraft a new lease of life. In France, the Mirage 3 NG, standing for Nouvelle Génération or New Generation, also received canards, an in-flight refueling capacity and a fine blue and white color scheme. Its first flight took place at Istres on the 21st of December 1982, and the aircraft was piloted at the next edition of Le Bourget by Guy Miteau-Mauroir. But the most elegant of the whole Mirage series at that time was undoubtedly the Mirage 4, whose clean lines were designed by Jean Cabrières. Directly descending from the Mirage 3 and incorporating the same essential concepts, the Mirage 4A is a two-seat high-performance bomber with incredibly good aging characteristics. The Mirage 4 has been impressing its pilots for the past 35 years, ever since its conception in 1959 and first flight at the hands of Roland Glavany. Here another great test pilot, René Bigan, flies the second prototype, soon to be responsible for the testing of nearly all Mirage 4 prototypes before being killed in a tragic accident in 1967, flying another Mirage, the F-1. The Mirage 4 was the first French aircraft to be able to cruise at twice the speed of sound, and incorporated many other innovations too, such as electronically controlled hydraulic mechanisms, a 500-litre fuel reservoir in the vertical tail surface, and an in-flight refueling system. After having covered both the nuclear bombardment and the strategic reconnaissance roles, 20 of the 64 Mirage 4As began being modified as of 1983 to be able to carry the ASMP, or Medium-Range Air-to-Ground Missile. Given their excellent state of maintenance, the twin-engine bombers will probably continue serving France well into the next century, which proves just how good the design is. Dassault is proud of its experience in the creation of combat aircraft, derived also from the design of many a prototype that was never developed, but which luckily the film crews of the company immortalized on celluloid. In these incredible sequences, René Bigan is at the controls of the Mirage 3V001, called the Balzac. This Mirage 3 was radically modified to take 8 vertical thrust engines as well as its single propulsion engine. This VTOL prototype was followed by 2 others. The Dassault engineers proved that the idea was feasible, but the excessive fuel consumption of the aircraft put an end to hopes that it might one day become operative. The Mirage 3 VO2, the last of the prototypes built, broke the speed record for vertical takeoff and landing aircraft in 1966, reaching more than Mach 2. The record remains unbroken. These incredible sequences are now part of history and need no comment. At Istres in December 1966, the successor to the Mirage 3 made its first takeoff. Unable to ensure sufficient stability at low speed, the Dassault team decided to return to the swept conventional wing formula, which has the added advantage of allowing the installation of large flaps and slats for operations in a wider range of speeds. The F-1 was the first of a new generation of combat aircraft. Like its predecessor, the Mirage F-1 is a small aircraft based around the Snecma ATAR 9K50 engine. The design of the aircraft, with its high and thin wing, leaves no choice but to host all systems, undercarriage, air brakes and fuel tanks in the fuselage. This technological challenge was not new to Dassault designers. "731 Mirage F-1s have been delivered to foreign air forces. Just as with the Mirage 3, various versions of the Mirage F-1 have also been built, but the basic aircraft is the Mirage F-1C, whose main role is interception. The F-1A was never ordered by the French Air Force, which instead uses, apart from the F-1C, the F-1B two-seater and the F-1CR for reconnaissance, deployed during the Gulf War of 1991 in this role, and for ground attack, and the F-1CT attack version. Although all these versions have a maximum speed of more than Mach 2, their design has limited their fuel and weapons loading capacity. One modification carried out as of the 200th production aircraft, which should improve their range, is an in-flight refueling capability. Here we see an aircraft of the 12th Fighter Wing of Cambrai topping up from a Boeing C-135FR. Combining the high-speed characteristics of the swept wing and the low-speed handling of the straight wing began to interest the Dassault design team under the direction of Jean-Paul Aimoret as of 1965, and brought about the first experiments in variable wing sweep technology. The Mirage G flew for the first time at Istres on the 18th of November 1967 with Jean Courreau at the controls. The aircraft was powered by a Pratt & Whitney TF306E, which provided 9.3 metric tons of thrust, as French engines available at the time were not powerful enough. Mach 1.5 was reached on the second flight, and Mach 2 the next week. Despite its complexity, the aircraft handled perfectly, and Jean Courreau was generous with praise for his little G. Well, because of the variable wing sweep, the Mirage G could be adapted to low or high speeds. At low speeds, with the wings set at 20 degrees and the large double-slotted flaps set at max lift, we attained the same lift as a civil aeroplane approaching at a speed of 130 knots and touching down at 120 knots. This was quite a difference for us pilots, being used to the 185 knots landing speed of the Mirage 3. With a sweep angle of 70 degrees, the aircraft had extremely good high-speed performance. And thanks to this high sweep angle, the aeroplane was very stable and comfortable in turbulent conditions.
La flèche 70 degrés donnait une très faible réponse à la turbulence. C'est un avion très confortable en turbulence. Il avait des perfos de montée fantastiques.
Its rate of climb was absolutely fantastic. According to ISO standards, it climbed at a speed of 700 knots, arriving at 40,000 feet at an angle of attack of over 10 degrees. The G8 performed even better, but it's really the little G that remained my favorite. The Mirage G8, the epitome of power and elegance, has held the European record for the fastest combat aircraft since the 13th of July 1973, when Jean-Marie Saget reached Mach 2.34 in the second prototype. It was powered by two Mirage F1 engines and, despite its weight, still had remarkable flight characteristics. But could the Armée de l'Air afford this expensive bird? The French Air Force has extensively tested the Mirage G8 to determine the best compromise in sweep angle. As we expected, 55 degrees proved to be ideal. From that point on, development was started on a prototype with a fixed sweep angle of 55 degrees. It was to be a very large twin-engined aircraft. But while the prototype was being built, military budgets were cut and the Air Force realized it couldn't afford to buy enough aircraft of this size and weight. A twin-engine fighter was just too expensive. So we had to return to a single-engined aircraft, and it was at that moment that Mr. Dassault came up with his Mirage 2000. The apparent similarity of the Mirage 2000 to the Mirage 3 is due mainly to the shape of its wing. The delta wing concept is interesting in that it offers a very rigid wing, and because of its large surface area, it has low wing loading, which makes the aircraft highly maneuverable at high altitudes, more maneuverable than any other aircraft. The approach speed of the Mirage 3, on the other hand, was very high. Thanks to fly-by-wire, we were able to move the center of gravity to the back, greatly enhancing the performance. Also, leading-edge flaps could be fitted. These flaps were well suited to electronic controls, but didn't work with mechanical controls, and that's why they've never been installed on the Mirage 3. The result of these improvements gave a 40% increase in performance. In other words, the delta wing, which was very good in flight, now also became acceptable while landing because approach speeds dropped to 145 or 140 knots. So the 2000 got even better than the F1 on approach. June 1977, finishing touches to the first aircraft are being made in the Saint-Cloud factory, the same factory that has seen the birth of all Dassault aircraft. Marcel Dassault, omnipresent, likes to visit the workshop and to walk around his latest aircraft, accompanied by Benoît-Claude Vallière, chief executive officer of the company, and by the design engineers. Despite looking very much like the Mirage 3, 20 years older, the Mirage 2000 is actually an entirely different plane with electronic systems as a dominant feature of its design. Electronic control systems eliminate all the defects that delta wings with conventional controls have. Computers interpret the pilot's instructions according to the aerodynamic situation of the aircraft, then pass on appropriate commands to the control surfaces. The aircraft, therefore, enjoys all the advantages of the delta wing: low weight, low drag at high speed, and good performance at high and low speeds, without any of the disadvantages. Taken apart in the summer of 1977, the Mirage 2000 prototype leaves Saint-Cloud, reaching Istres on the following 1st of October. This is where the builder test flies all his aircraft and where Jean Corot was to take the Mirage 2000 up for the first time. Morale is always very high before the first flight because you're sure of the aircraft. In fact, the first flight is just a part of a routine of engine tests, high-speed taxis, running in of the brakes, runs to study the way the nose wheel leaves the ground, and so on. Next, there's the little flea jump, which puts you really at ease in the aircraft, so the first flight is just the next step. But as there are many people around, you're a bit nervous and you're not as comfortable as usual. But once you're airborne, everything's fine. The Mirage 2000-01 took to the air in the Provence sky on the 10th of March 1978, less than 2 years after the official green light was given to the program. At 15:48 hours, the prototype made its maiden flight, with Jean Coureau testing its controls.
Je garde 220 nœuds.
During this first flight, I was struck by the stability of the aircraft compared with anything I'd known before. It felt as steady as a rock in the skies. But as soon as I made a maneuver, it was extremely agile. This was a combination of qualities I'd not experienced before. In the control room, the Dassault engineers check flight parameters in real time under the vigilant eye of their director Jean-François Cozobiel.
36 400 pieds, 87 de Mach. Alors PC 7, oui monsieur. Je viens de passer Mach 1. Affirmatif. 1,30.
Several months later, the second prototype arrived at Istres, displaying the culvert duck symbol on its fuselage, a reminder that its pilot Guy Miteau-Mourouard was an ex-pilot of the 1st Squadron, 10th Wing, Valois. The first two prototypes, now painted in white in time for the Bourget show of 1979, was soon joined by the third prototype, which bore a more operational colour scheme. This formation flight over Provence brought them all together for the first time. The most advanced techniques, such as the use of composite materials, are employed in the construction of the Mirage 2000. But the most important feature of the aircraft is the integrated electrical control system. This allows the aircraft to fly at very slow speeds, as this formation flight with the General Aviation TB-20 Trinidad shows. We incorporated automatic limiters into the onboard computers, which make life very easy for a fighter pilot. For instance, you can't lose control of the aircraft and get into a spin. This is fantastic during a dogfight because the pilot can do anything he wants with his aircraft. He can put the stick wherever he likes. The aircraft won't leave its flight envelope. So he can push it to its very limits, and this is an enormous advantage. Not having to worry about loss of control during a dogfight is fantastic. Also, you can't brake the aircraft. The computers automatically eliminate the G-load, taking away another reason for concern. Even at high speeds, you can put the controls at maximum deflection. The aircraft won't exceed 9G, which is already more than enough, by the way. At the end of the 1960s, the Dassault Test Centre was transferred from Melun-Villaroche to Istres near Marseille for two fundamental reasons. First, to avoid the heavy air traffic near Paris, and secondly, to take advantage of the better climate in the south of France. A small test detachment also operates from Cazaux, which is specialized in weapons testing, and where all prototypes are eventually tested. Here, for example, we see zero-speed testing, which had hitherto been impossible in jet aircraft. Cable brake testing. And and use of ski jumps on takeoff. Here, the video camera fixed under the wing of the aircraft helps testers verify the efficiency of the main undercarriage suspension. The Mirage 2000 is a multi-role aircraft, which means that it's able to carry out a variety of missions. It carries a wide range of offensive systems, of which we see a few examples here. Above all, like all its forebears, the single-seater carries two deeper 30mm caliber cannon with 125 rounds per gun. These two fuselage-mounted cannons, seen being tested at the Cazo Center, can fire up to 1,800 rounds per minute. Weapons systems are also intensely tested at the Land Test Center, after which live firing takes place at Cazo. This Matra 550 Magic II is a heat-seeking air-to-air missile with a range of between 500 meters and 10 kilometers. The Matra Super 530 has even better performance. And the AS-30L, built by Aerospatiale, is accurate to within 50 centimeters. It's guided to a ground target by a laser illuminating device carried by ground troops or in a pod carried by the aircraft itself. The same pod is used to guide 1,000-kilo SMART or laser-guided bombs with an accuracy of 5 meters. However, in ground attack missions, the Mirage 2000 can also carry conventional bombs or more sophisticated weapons, such as the BAP-100 and the Durandal, the anti-runway bomb, whose concrete-piercing capacity is aided by a rocket activated just before impact. In 1974, the design engineers at Dassault had baptized the Mirage 2000 Mimi, for Mini Mirage, as opposed to Mami for Maxi Mirage, which was to be the Super Mirage 4000, a larger version of the Mirage 2000, powered by two Snecma MP53P2 and employing the same technologies used in the Mirage 2000. It was what Marcel Dassault and the air staff considered a perfect aircraft for the whole of the Armée de l'Air. However, the better performance of the fighter was also accompanied by a higher price, and the French Air Force, as with the ACF, just couldn't afford the plane. Furthermore, if the French Air Force was not going to buy it, there'd be little chance that it would be sold abroad, and although it was a fine plane to watch at air shows such as Farnborough in 1986, it ended its career in the French Air Museum. In July 1984, the second fighter wing at Dijon received the first air defense Mirage 2000s to be delivered to the Air Force. The wing also took on the responsibility of training pilots and ground crews through the ETIS Mirage 2000, or Specialized Training Center, set up on the Burgundy base, which allowed the crews under training to become familiar with the airframe, engine, weapon system, and avionics. The maintenance of the aircraft is particularly carefully designed in order to reduce time between flights. The integrated maintenance systems enable two mechanics only to make the plane flight-worthy. In a combat situation, the aircraft can be refueled and rearmed for an air defense mission in 15 minutes. Arming and refueling are eased by equipment developed by the Dassault Support Equipment Division, which designed this bomb-loading trolley, for example. As weapon systems become increasingly complex, the efficiency of pilots and ground crews depends increasingly on the use of advanced training systems, such as the Training and Maintenance Simulator or this DAISY Navitac training simulator. The CEC, or Combat Training Center, and the Thomson Combat Mission Simulators are based at Dijon. These allow the pilot to be trained for specific missions and under specific conditions. Each pilot uses the simulator about 20 times. Before reaching their units, all aircraft pass through the CEAM, or Military Air Testing Center, at Mont-de-Marsan in the Landes. Thus it was at 24 Squadron 188 Wing, which became 5 Squadron 330 Wing Côte d'Argent in 1987, that operational testing of the Mirage 2000 and the training of its first pilots took place.
Nord Whisky Dijon Airport. Et scramble, cap 330, 330, montée PC Max.
Powered by its Snecma M53-5 providing 9 tons of thrust, this Mirage 2000C takes off for an identification mission. The aircraft is equipped with a multi-role Thomson RDM Doppler radar and is guided by the Intercept Control Center. In the event, the intruder is a lost light aircraft without radio.
A priori en panne radio, relèvement 180 degrés, distance 40 nautiques au cap 340.
Maro Whisky reçu, j'ai contact radar à 38 nautiques.
Maro Whisky, vous effectuerez d'abord une reconnaissance à distance, 1000 pieds, 1000 mètres.
Maro Whisky, j'ai visuel sur un avion de tourisme de type monomoteur.
Maro Whisky, vous êtes autorisé à vous rapprocher.
Maro Whisky, c'est un TB20. Il y a 4 personnes à bord et je vais battre des plans pour demander au pilote de me suivre.
Rambert reçu, vous vous poserez sur le terrain de Dijon.
Maro Whisky, bien reçu, le pilote a compris et il me suit.
The second wing at Dijon, like the 5th at Orange and the 12th at Cambrai, all fly the Mirage 2000 B and C, both called within the Armée de l'Air the Mirage 2000DA for air defense. Both aircraft use the same weapon systems, although the two-seater has no cannon and has a reduced fuel capacity. As soon as the mission is over, the ground crew prepare the aircraft for the next mission, whereas the weapons loaders rearm the fuselage-mounted weapons and reload the wing pylons. Preparation for an air defense mission begins with the loading of data into the small computers called Parameter Insertion Modules, or MIPs. Navigation is simplified, therefore, with the introduction into these MIPs of significant geographical features, turning points, target coordinates, or flight altitude according to the geography of the terrain. All this data is then loaded into the aircraft navigation computer. This passes on most of the navigation to the avionics systems, leaving the pilot to concentrate on his weapons system and potential threats. As with many modern combat aircraft, the Mirage 2000 can operate in electronically hostile environments and is equipped with passive and active countermeasures. They're the result of advanced research and are integrated into the original design. This complex system includes passive radar detectors, an active interference system, and flare systems designed to confuse both radar-guided and heat-seeking missiles. French airspace is constantly monitored by 10 ground-based radar stations and now also by airborne AWACS aircraft. The air defense capability of the French Air Force has greatly increased with the arrival of the Mirage 2000 in the 4 air defense wings. All versions of the Mirage 2000 can be refueled in flight. They all have refueling probes which can, if necessary, be removed. This increases considerably the range of the aircraft, which can now reach any point in the world without having to land. France operates 2 different in-flight refueling tankers, the C-135FR and the smaller C-160 Transall. The 5th fighter wing, based at Orange, like the 12th based at Cambrai, is equipped with M53 P2-powered Mirage 2000 DAs, with 900 kilos more thrust than the aircraft based at Dijon. They also mount an RDI Doppler radar, which is more powerful than the RDM. When the 2nd fighter wing received the Mirage 2000 in 1984, neither the new engine nor the new radar were available. The first Mirage 2000 RDI reached Orange 4 years later in 1988 and reached Cambrai in 1992. At the end of the mission, on-board recorded data and film are removed for analysis. This allows the squadron to extract data recorded by the radar, sensors, countermeasures, or simply to check how successful the mission has been. The base is equipped to read and analyze this information and use it for future reference. The Mirage 2000N crews use the Paloma system to prepare their missions. This is similar to the MIP, but is specifically designed for the Mirage 2000N's mission and includes detailed cartography. The Mirage 2000N, a close cousin of the air defense version, carries France's pre-strategic nuclear deterrent, and now also has the capacity for conventional attack. Its 2-seat cockpit hosts pilot and weapons system officer, who is responsible for managing the complex weapons load of the aircraft, and the terrain-following radar Antelope 5, built by Dassault Electronique. This aircraft of the 4th Fighter Wing, armed with an ASMP or medium-range air-to-ground missile, is one of the 25 Mirage 2000N K1s, whose role is pre-strategic nuclear strike. The Aerospatiale ASMP has a warhead potential of 300 kilotons. The second series of the N version, or K2s, have a primary conventional strike role, although they maintain their nuclear capacity.
Alignement décollage autorisé, le vent 224 nœuds.
Take-off for a conventional training mission of a Mirage 2000N. The camera fixed to the tail gives an impressive view of low flight level over the rugged Cévennes, too low to be seen by radar and near to the speed of sound. Altitude is 90 meters only, but the safety of the crew is ensured by the terrain-following radar and careful preparation of the mission by the crew. Since the mission of the Mirage 2000N is completely different from that of the air defense versions, the French Air Force has voluntarily limited the speed of the aircraft to Mach 1.5, although it's maintained an air-to-air capacity with 2 wingtip Magic II missiles. As with all two-seaters, the Mirage 2000N has no internal cannon, but does have efficient integrated electronic countermeasures. The Mirage 2000N also introduced for the first time the large aerodynamic underwing fuel pods, which contain 2,000 litres of fuel, and increased the range of the aircraft so as to limit the number of in-flight refueling operations required. The Mirage 2000N is operated by the 4th Fighter Wing of Luxeuil, with 1 squadron detached at Istres. The 2nd Squadron of the 3rd Wing is based at Nancy. The strike version of the Mirage 2000N took part in the Red Flag exercise in Nevada for the first time during 1992. This exercise, which is designed to simulate the hostile combat environment as realistically as possible, showed how efficient both the Mirage 2000Ns and Cs and their crews were. The Mirage 2000D for Diversified is another attack version of the Mirage 2000. 90 units have been ordered by the Armée de l'Air to back up the Mirage 2000N. It flew for the first time on the 19th of February 1991 and can carry out the same missions as the Mirage 2000N, but can also carry more modern weaponry, such as the Apache missile, a submunition dispenser launched at a safe distance from the target, and laser-guided weapons such as the AS-30L. The Mirage 2000D has a completely updated cockpit, an enhanced accuracy navigation system, and a wraparound camouflage scheme. This is a Mirage 2000N lent to the builder by the Armée de l'Air so as to simulate the D version at the Bourget show in 1991. The Mirage 2000S, designed for export, is a non-nuclear capable Mirage 2000D. Seven air forces have acquired the Mirage 2000 to defend their own airspace. Among them is Greece, who took possession of its first Mirage 2000 during a ceremony held at Bordeaux-Mérignac in 1988 in the presence of Serge Dassault himself.
Alors voici les 4 avions, je crois que les 2 premiers, je ne sais pas s'il y a un biplace, il y a un monoplace qui doivent partir. Lequel doivent partir en tête?
The 40 Mirage 2000s of the Greek Air Force operate from the base of Tanagra, where they serve with the 331st and 332nd Mira. The Mirages are, alongside the F-16, the most advanced aircraft the Greek Air Force operates. Egypt was the first country to order the Mirage 2000 in 1982 and has acquired 16 single-seat and 4 two-seat aircraft. The first of these landed at Qahira near Cairo in June 1986. Jordan had ordered 12 aircraft but was forced to cancel the order in 1991 following the Gulf War and Saudi Arabia's refusal to finance the deal. The United Arab Emirates have acquired 36 aircraft divided into 2 squadrons which took part in the liberation of Kuwait. Both squadrons, one specialized in air defense and the other in ground attack, each with a different color scheme, together operate 30 single-seaters and 6 two-seaters, of which 8 in all are optimized for reconnaissance missions. The first Mirage 2000s acquired by the Indian Air Force were escorted into Indian airspace by MiG-21s and landed on Indian soil for the first time on the 2nd of June 1985. They're based at Gwalior. The 49 aircraft known in India as Vajra or Divine Thunder are divided into 2 squadrons, the 1st or Tigers and the 7th or Battle Axe squadrons. The Indian pilots, who are used to flying Soviet-built aircraft, were trained by French Air Force instructors on the base of Dijon, within the 2-2 squadron Côte d'Or. Ever faithful to the French builder, Peru is so far the only South American country to have ordered the Mirage 2000. An order was placed for 24 aircraft in 1985, but since then only 12 have been delivered due to the country's economic difficulties. These aircraft are not easily approached, but these sequences, filmed by an amateur and not of very high quality, show a Mirage 2000P taking off from the base of La Jolla, with the splendid Andes chain as a backdrop. The latest development in the combat aircraft is the Mirage 2005, which incorporates the most advanced technology, the fighter pilot's dream plane. Although it looks astoundingly like a Mirage 2000DA, its appearance is misleading. Its radar, countermeasures, weapons and cockpit are entirely new. It was presented for the first time with Patrick Experton at the controls at the Bourget show of 1991. The Mirage 2005's incredible handling qualities are shown off by the smoke generators. The first flight of a Mirage 2005 took place at Istres on the 24th of October 1990. The aircraft was exported for the first time when Taiwan ordered 60 units in the autumn of 1992. The 5 is the embodiment of the best weapons technology available today, including efficient multi-target tracing radar, latest generation missile capacity, a new countermeasures package, glass cockpit, and HOTAS design, which allows the pilot to manage nearly all the flight without having to let go of the throttle and stick. A large number of functions are carried out through the throttle and stick, which host up to 15 switches. The cockpit, entirely redesigned, has 5 advanced electronic displays, and the new Thomson multifunction holographic head-up display superimposes an IR image of the landscape below over the displayed parameters and over the view from the cockpit. The same image can be projected onto the central display, which also visualizes all the information gathered by the aircraft's sensors. The head-down display is the same as those present in all the cockpits of the Mirage 2000 series and projects the radar image and flight parameters. The starboard display is usually dedicated to aircraft environment. horizon and ECM, whereas the port display shows navigation data and weapons management parameters. The pilot can, however, move data from one display to another during flight. The heart of the new weapons system is, of course, the new Thompson CSF-RDY, which is a powerful radar able to detect and follow formations flying at high and low altitude. It's fully multifunctional in the air-to-air, air-to-ground and air-to-sea modes, tracking up to 8 targets at a time. In the air-to-air mode, the aircraft can fire the new Matra-Mika missile designed for new generation aircraft such as the Rafale. This is the first multi-target missile developed in Europe, is extremely flexible and can be fired in any weather conditions. Although it has never been in real combat, the Mirage 2000 proved its worth during the Gulf War of 1991, or Operation Daguet as the French deployment was called. These aircraft of the 5th Fighter Wing of Orange, which we see landing on the small airfield of Al-Aqsa in the Saudi desert, provided air cover during the 522 combat, reconnaissance and attack missions carried out by the French Jaguars and F-1CRs. They also carried out a large number of air control missions on behalf of the Allies, more than 400 kilometers from their air bases. Despite not having ever encountered armed opposition, to the sorrow of the French pilots, the Mirage 2000 still proved its ruggedness. The aircraft sent to the Gulf had a 98% rate of combat worthiness under the severest climatic conditions, which kept many Allied aircraft on the ground. The ease of maintenance, the competence of the mechanics and the D system combined to ensure the efficiency of the French equipment. These Jaguar pilots, preparing for the first combat mission over occupied Kuwait, were to fly no less than 615 missions in all, carrying a variety of weaponry such as the AS-30 laser-guided conventional bomb, smart bombs, belugas, or 100mm rockets. The Jaguar proved itself to be a true bomb humper and showed just how tough its design is, despite having a limited avionics package which doesn't allow for night operations. The pilots of the 7th and 11th Fighter Wings pushed their equipment to its limits and contributed decisively to the liberation of Kuwait from the Iraqi invader. Being vulnerable to attack from the air, the Jaguars were protected by Mirage 2000 CRDIs, armed with air-to-air missiles, and under the general command of the US forces. Placed under the command and control of American or Saudi AWACS, these aircraft had their brake chutes replaced by flare launchers. The distances that separated the airbase at Al-Aqsa from the targets caused the pilots of F-1CRs, Jaguars and Mirage 2000s to top up their tanks at the in-flight refueling probes of the French Air Force tankers. Although great emphasis had been placed on the transport crews, it shouldn't be forgotten that tanker crews carried out no less than 8 missions a day. Surgical strike was used to perfection. Among the instruments used was the AS-30 laser-guided bomb, dropped more than 10 kilometers from the target and whose margin of error was less than 1 meter. The Atlas pod containing a television and a laser illuminates the target designated by the pilot. Once within range, the missile is launched and is guided to the target. The target is kept in view automatically, allowing the pilot to keep his aircraft out of range of enemy fire. On return to base after a mission that lasts on average 4 hours with 2 in-flight refuelings, the mechanics of Orange, like their colleagues from Toul, Saint-Dizier and Strasbourg, begin maintenance of their aircraft, none of which will remain inactive for more than 24 hours. Whatever the type of aircraft, the routine is the same everywhere. Fueling up, checking weapons and missiles, preparation of aircraft for the next mission. A flight of Mirage 2000s patrols Saudi airspace constantly. During 43 days of war, the Armée de l'Air carried out in all 2,472 sorties and 1,387 combat missions. Tonight, the Americans have entrusted Night Quick Reaction Alert to the French. A delta-winged combat aircraft, worthy representative of the 536 Mirage 2000s ordered and the youngest member of the Mirage family, flies off into the night sky, as though to join the father of them all, Marcel Dassault.